figure out where everybody wants to have sidewalks. So I'm gonna let Barry take care of me here for a minute. My name is Steve Palmer. I am Council 2 Bethany City Council representative. I'm here with Mark Long, and we're going to talk about overlays and sidewalks. But before we start, I think everybody's coming in. Why doesn't everybody just stand up? There's some people here that probably don't know each other. Let's take 3 or 4 minutes, find somebody you don't know, and say, I believe in Bethany. We're good.
Hi, dude. How are you?
We're good.
Raising Cane today, fella? Huh? Raising Cane? Raising Cane?
What else is there? Okay, very good. Today we have a public meeting related to overlays and sidewalks in the city of Bethany. And what I want to go over is a brief synopsis of kind of where we're going to go tonight and what we're going to talk about. We're going to start off with some initial information about overlays and why they're important to our neighborhood. And then we're going to go into the survey results. We're going to, how many of you all took the survey that was available either online or in the mail? Well, I think we had, what, 250 participants, so we have those survey results tonight. So we'll be able to kind of go through those. We'll talk about the pros and the cons, and we'll kind of hash out those issues. I think you're going to be kind of surprised with some of the survey results. I know I was. Kind of an interesting mix of online and paper surveys that we sent out. And then the last 10 minutes, we're going to talk about sidewalks. So here's how we're going to do the meeting. If we'll have question and answers, and we'll have microphones. Mr. Carlson and Mark will be able to get you a microphone, so I want to make sure everybody hears everybody. And then hopefully we'll have an open discussion about all of these issues and the questions on the survey. If you have a brilliant answer and you qualify for candy, I will randomly throw stuff at you. So that I don't think is in violation of any particular statute, Open Meetings Act requirement or anything like that. So be prepared. I'm not responsible for any injuries. Can we all agree to that? Okay, we've all, full disclosure and a release and indemnity and hold harmless clause. All right, so that's where we're going. Let's talk about overlays. Does anybody know what an overlay is? Ms. Shannon? Sure.
An overlay is an overlay zoning category that's going to go over a particular zoning category that's going to stay in existence for land use, but the overlay would have other restrictions or allow other uses or changes in the way you control that land use.
Very nice. I will take that as an acceptable answer. Why do we need an overlay in the city of Bethany? Because we have, let's just face it, a different blend of housing, and we need to come up with a master plan as to how we want to further develop this area. If you lived in Ward 2, you've seen some housing that has been updated. Houses have been knocked down. They've been replaced with bigger houses because they're either in the district or the location. So we need to maintain that character, but then we also need to have the kind of the neighborhood feel that we all enjoy and want to have in Bethany. So like Julie said, it is a overlay in that there are guidelines and requirements that are put over the existing ordinances that will allow us to have further development in our neighborhood. A good example of that recently came up with the width of the roadway related to the early childhood development facility for the schools. The ordinances required a wider road, and Mr. Caton, I know I'm glossing over valuable details, but bear with me. The road, per the current ordinances, had to be so wide, but in reality, we only wanted it to be this wide as opposed to that wide. So an overlay would provide an opportunity for the city to look at those ordinances and say, okay, that's an issue that will be addressed, and here's how we need to follow that process. I mean, is that a fair statement, Mark?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I love that. I got a yes man. All right. So
and there's
here,
a graphic that shows how you have existing zoning and existing plat and lots, and then how you can actually have other requirements, like you said. They could be more restrictive, or they could be more compatible with this particular Ward 2 neighborhood, as opposed to what would be in Ward 4 or Ward 3.
right, and so we're the guinea pig to the extent that this never has been done in Bethany. So we're going to do this in Ward 2, the neighborhood school area, hopefully north of 50th, and kind of combine all this so that we can have a plan and then go into different parts of the city with different wards and things like that. So with that in mind, are there any more slides that we need to put
I
up
think
here?
that's about it. And it just gives you that flexibility to be able to maintain the character of the neighborhood, not change the look of it. There's asphalt streets in the district neighborhood as opposed to the city standard of concrete streets. So we might want to be able to just leave everything the way the look is and not have to meet the current concrete standard for the rest of the city at this time.
So the real question is, so how do we get there? What's the process to get a consensus for what we need to establish an overlay? So the city and the staff was able to come up with this survey. And this is the beginning, this is the process of discussion. So we sent out the survey. I think we got some pretty good results. I was pretty happy with that. And what I'd like to do now is go through the survey. I'm exactly on schedule. And we'll hash through these questions. And what I'd like to do is we'll present the survey question, we'll show you the results, and then I would like to discuss kind of the pros and the cons, get some consensus in the room as to where we are, if that's an accurate assessment as to who's, your opinion at this point in time, and then we'll go through these one by one and hopefully be able to hash through some of these issues that have come up. Does that sound good to you guys? Oh my goodness, come on. We're not, Yes. Very good, thank you. Okay, very good. Let's go to the importance of having condos and townhouses. Now, before we get into this, I want everybody to be clear that, everybody talks about mixed use, right? And Mark knows exactly what mixed use is, but in this overlay, you need to understand that this is for the neighborhood as opposed to the central business district, which is a part of Bethany proper. Now, in the central business district, you have different ordinances which would allow mixed use. Is that correct, Mark?
That's correct.
And so, my yes man, I love it. So we need to make sure we're clear on our understanding of how the overlay would apply and whether or not that would be related to mixed use. It wouldn't necessarily apply to mixed use, which, if you know what mixed use is, it's retail on the bottom and then housing on the top or some variation of that. Does everybody understand that? Okay. All right, so let's go into the importance of having condos and townhomes. It's pretty interesting that 45.38% of the people who we surveyed really didn't think that was important. What do you guys think?
No.
You don't think it is? Why, Meg?
People come to the neighborhood for going to the school. So families are not going to a townhouse or condos, probably not going to meet their needs.
Okay. Now, what about, Mark, could you tell them what a PUD is?
Yeah, that's a planned unit development, and that allows you to actually take a particular tract of land and then develop that in a way that is restricted based on whatever the plan is, and provide either a residential or a commercial use, but yet you follow the guidelines that you work up in the plan. It needs to meet city standards on things and industry design standards, but it would allow you to do things that you would otherwise not be able to do under the current zoning requirements.
Right, so I think that would somehow fall under the condo townhomes issue. But there have been some success in Oklahoma City where they have a given tract of land and they develop townhomes, and then they have it's either a PUD or some kind of development that's allowed in the area. But based upon these results, that's kind of a 50-50 proposition here with the 250 people that did this survey. I mean, does anybody else see anything in this survey that's interesting they want to talk about? Jill? We need a microphone?
And while he's getting there was one comment where it talked about this type of housing as associated with the university.
Okay.
So that's where this came up. There was a positive comment towards university students at SNU wanting to have housing options that were within a walking distance and did not want to have a large home.
Right.
That's with the growth that the Children's Center has got, with them having doctors and staff members that would like to have very nice homes, but maybe don't need a large home. And you know, everybody that lives here doesn't have children going to school. We yes, a lot of them do, and that is the reason that a lot of them are there. But we've got professors and different people that are involved with both of our universities. We've got people that are working and are involved with the Children's Center, Rehabilitation Hospital, and all of them would like newer housing stocks, but maybe not a lot of maintenance and other things like that. And so at least to provide, right now, if you want that, you've got to go out of Bethany in order to get it. And so
Right.
it would be really nice to provide it here.
I think that, give that lady some candy. That is that is an emerging market in the area. I mean, I think that's a fair statement. That is it something to take in consideration? That's something that we have to look forward to. Yes, sir.
The only argument I have with it is if you are doing the students have such strict requirements to, because I mean, I own a blood nutrition club across the street from the students, and their requirements of living.
Yeah, we might try that one more time. There we go.
The restrictions for the students to live off campus is so strict. It's either 22 years old or family emergency or different things like that. So for them to live off campus and have student housing outside of that, it is so strict for them to do it. I don't see the argument of the students because of that.
Right, and that's a good point, but I think there's also, you know, obviously the university, if they grow, they're going to need space in an area which would kind of fall within the townhouse idea. Yes, sir, Mr. Carlson.
One other thing, going back to Jill.
I don't know what.
Going back to what Jill said on the Children's Center, one of the requirements for many of their employees, and they're 800 and some, many of their employees are required to live within a 15-minute response time. And that's why during inclement weather, the Children's Center takes over a full floor of the Holiday Inn.
Right. That's a good problem to have, and I think that's something that we can address in the overlay. Jill? Julie, I'm sorry. Did I say Jill? That's Jill, you're Julie.
One other thing is property values. If you had some higher end townhomes or something like that, the school has the issue that they need room to grow, so they end up buying properties and they go off the tax rolls, and they have to have a certain amount of property tax to, have an operating budget. And if you had some higher end townhomes that in an area that was compatible, you wouldn't want to just plop them down in an area that wasn't the right area for it. But if you had some higher end townhomes that would help with the property value to offset that, because it's just something that comes up all the time with the school.
That's an excellent point. And in Bethany, we can hopefully get the overlay with,
Does she get candy?
oh yeah, she already had some. Title 15, where IBTS is kind of redoing our ordinances, and then we would have the overlay, and then we've got charter review, because we have a limitation on the total amount per acre. So there are a lot of factors at play, but that's an excellent point. Yes, sir.
I apologize if I'm asking a redundant question. I came in a few minutes late. Is this only for the Bethany school area or
Yeah.
Bethany as a whole?
This is for the Bethany school area. This is the first overlay that we're trying to put in place, but it does apply to other areas of the city of Bethany, because we're
Those
gonna,
250 were the whole city in essence.
That's correct. And so the idea would be, we're going to do this in other areas, and if you're part of the process now, then you're very familiar with what's going to happen in the future. So to answer your question, it will be for the school district area, but we will apply the same process to different parts of the city. Is that fair?
Fair enough. And my suggestion would be then, just because you have a condo or a townhome doesn't necessarily mean it's a lower demographic. So I would encourage to strongly consider that, because in an area like Bethany where you're landlocked, you need as much disposable income in a state like Oklahoma to generate that sales tax revenue. So it'd be very wise, in my opinion, to have a component of that. Also, from your scaling perspective, with the corridor on 39, to incorporate that as well.
Excellent comment. Give that man
Does
some
he
candy.
get some candy? Okay.
You want, that's a chocolate response right there.
He asked if the 250 responses came from all of Bethany. Weren't they just Ward 2?
They were Ward 2 that we sent out. We initially, thank you, Arlita. We sent out postcards telling them that it's coming out, and then we sent it out to them in their bill, their utility bill, and then we had an access via online. If you went online, you type in your address, and you could be outside the city. So we kind of had a little mix, but I think we have a fair representation.
And this is a good time to shout out to the city staff, in that this is the first time that Bethany's been able to do that. They were able to segregate it out based on utility bills. We were able to get people within Ward 2. There was a postcard, a mailing, an online option. And so, like Steve said, this is a prototype for other wards, and I think you're going to be talking with other council members. Other wards have different issues, okay? But the process that was developed for this ward now can be used for other vision plan and other surveys and public input. So
Okay, so one more question, and then we'll go on to the next thing. Yes, ma'am.
Did I hear you say that some of it was sent outside the city? Did I hear you say some of them, the surveys were sent outside of the city?
No, ma'am. They were sent to residents in Ward. JR, you were part of the process.
Have a choice here. Some of the residents within the city had outside of the city mailing addresses, although they did have a residence here in Ward 2 in the school district.
Very good. I think that's that's clarification is what you need. All right, let's move to the next question. Importance of mixed use. I briefly described this. Well, this is kind of hit in the middle, 46.2. Somewhat important. So it's neither hot or cold, it's kind of lukewarm. What do y'all think about that result? It's kind of an interesting situation. And mixed use meaning central business district, retail on the bottom, apartments or, housing on second and third floor. I think we've talked about that issue. Jill did a good job of kind of describing the good problem we have related to Children's Hospital and their need for housing. So I think that's something that we can address in the overlay, but more importantly, I think it's probably through charter review and the charter that prevents us from having a certain mass of people in a particular area, and then the review of Chapter 15 or Title 15.
Yeah.
I think I'm a liar. I say chapter.
I think this is indicative of, this is a residential neighborhood. So this was probably what we would have expected. So that, the response is, if it happens in the central business district, fine, but they're not necessarily worried about what it might happen on the perimeters of the neighborhood.
Right. What do y'all think about that? Comments, suggestions, pros, cons? Yes, ma'am.
Where is the site supposed to be?
The central business district?
No, for the building, the
condo?
Well, that's a good question. It'll either be in the central business district, or it'll be through a PUD, which is a kind of a centralized development, or you could have a townhome on an actual lot, depending on how that will happen in the district. Does that answer your question?
Well,
No.
there's no specifics.
Right.
of
I'm confused as to where the location was.
Well, I don't want one across the street from my house
Okay. That's,
for property value. And unless it's high-end and it's going to maintain that value or go up, then we're just going to be, I believe you're just going to turn into some form of Lyrewood Lane, and I don't think that's a good idea for Bethany.
okay. I appreciate that. Arlita?
I'd just like to add that I've lived in a university community where there were 3-bedroom, 2-bath condos with garages on, parking on the inside of the unit, and they were expensive, and they were very desired by the professionals and the faculty and the people who were maybe there getting a degree, but they didn't want to have to buy a house while they were getting their master's degree or doctorate or whatever. So there are people who don't like to mow grass on weekends and would rather travel and do other stuff, and that kind of unit works well for them.
Okay. Jill?
One of the growing segments of the population are seniors, and one of the real trends is seniors wanting to move to walkable communities where they don't have to take garden homes and places where they don't have to take a lot. One of the things I hear that people love about Bethany so much is that we're a multi-generational community, that we've got grandparents, parents, and children living near one another, and that they love that. Right now, most of the homes in Bethany require a lot of maintenance because they are old. So that is one reason why having some smaller homes that are newer and easy to take care of are really important. Another thing is we need retail dollars. Having mixed use means we're not sacrificing retail space, good retail space, in order to put in housing that we need to grow. So if you can put in retail shops on the ground floor and have people that want to live in some of these other places on stories 2 and 3, like one unit that's a 2-story unit,
Right.
that's a pretty good size, and that makes a lot of sense.
To answer your question, the mixed use as it is right now can only be in the central business district, which is 39th South all the way to Beaver over to 36. So that's the area where mixed use can be at this point in time. That may change, but it's kind of where a development that Jill, or a building that Jill just described, would be located. It wouldn't be located in the neighborhood as of right now. Okay, let's go on to the next. Any other comments, questions?
I would like to see owner occupied, in the fact that, as Jill mentioned, as they get older, you want somebody that wants to take care of it. As it gets older and it's not new and shiny any longer, people may not want to stay there. They want something else new again. So if you have an owner occupied, they will take care of it and keep it up.
Okay, good point. All right, let's talk about streetscapes. Does everybody know what a streetscape is?
Would you like to look at a picture?
Yes, we would. Let's see what a streetscape is. I always think about the area on 23rd Street over by Big Truck Taco. Have you ever been over there, where they have the trees in the middle? That's a good example of streetscape. Here's, kind of a picture of...
This is a view looking at 42nd and Peniel.
Really?
Maybe someday.
Oh, really? We did a little graphic there. But that would include, you see the variance in the roadway, the sidewalk, the pavers. the street lights, something like that. You know, some type of, trees in the, sidewalk area, some transition areas, things like that. That's what we're talking about when we say streetscape. So everybody kind
You
of,
could even have purple light poles if you wanted to, if you're looking at Bethany Public Schools. We had to have a little bit of levity, and then we'll throw some Skittles out to the young lady that is sitting here.
okay, very good. Let's go back to the survey. Survey says somewhat important, so we kind of struck the middle in that situation. What do y'all think about that? Good, bad, pros, cons? Yes, ma'am.
On what you sent out, there's a picture of downtown, and I took that as you were going to be doing it there also.
Well, the proposal for the overlay that we're looking at, and nothing's been decided, but there would be a streetscape in the area of 42nd Street and then 50th. Because 50th is not, I mean, you can tell there's a difference. You drive from War Acres into Bethany and the width changes and things like that. So that's what we're looking at this point.
And then there was some talk about looking at Peniel and Mueller, which are collector roads.
Right, and that would mean some kind of streetscape, widening, curbing, specified asphalt paving, things like that. Better road. That's a direct way of saying it. So,
but it also sounds like you're going to be taking property from the residents.
Well,
there
is a right of way in those areas, and that'll all be taken care of and studied, approved, and things like that before we do anything, obviously.
Yeah, if you're going to look at it, the idea was look at what would fit the typical section of the roadway that's there, and then try to accommodate streetscape elements within the right-of-way that we have.
And streetscape would also include issues related to parking and things like that. I know we've got some things on Willow and in our neighborhood where we've got kids with, they go in and out of the school and things like that. So that's all kind of under the umbrella of streetscape.
Question.
Yes.
The parks, would you be taking parking places downtown?
No.
From businesses to make them green?
Well, no, that's a different priority. All we're talking about is the neighborhood.
Okay.
So we're not talking about the central business district. I think that's something else that we're not going to. It may be a part of a different overlay. It may be part of a TIF. It may be part of some kind of development that the city has in the central business district.
Well, I'm all for better streets,
Right.
Especially Mueller, since it's a major artery through
Yes.
Bethany from 63rd to 23rd. And right there at Bethany School, I mean, it's just really inexcusable that is our road.
I'm not going to argue with that at all.
But I don't know that I want to take any of their yard space.
Well, that's something we'll have to consider, and that's
That the vision plan, the draft vision plan, is identify Mueller, Peniel, 42nd as all collector roads that are important for traffic and movement of people around. And that'll be something that has to work out as far as how wide does the road need to be? Do you add one sidewalk on one side? Do you put a drainage ditch on one side? And in the draft vision plan, that's what we've kind of proposed, is you can have both and still fit within right-of-way that you have.
Well, and let me put this in context. We're just talking about this at this point. We're going to have a whole lot more meetings when we get to the point where we're going to finalize an overlay. And all those terms are going to be available to the residents of Bethany, and we're going to hash through that as best we can and come to a consensus as to where we want to go and how we want to do it. So those are excellent issues that we are working on and need to resolve. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make one more comment about the plans that you have, and I think that we have a lot of serious drainage problems, like the picture of the road. My son actually drove through that
Oh, I know.
and kept on driving until he got home, and I believe that God sent a mechanic, because we had the hood up looking at it, and he said, you're going to have to run this for an hour or all of your electricals will be fried and your car will be over.
That is coming up.
We
That's
have a survey question on storm
Okay,
drains.
but
Excellent.
I think until we have drivable roads, why would you even worry about a sidewalk?
Well, that's an excellent point too, and that's why with this topic, with Mueller and Penile being major feeder roads, the streetscape, part of that probably will be related to repaving and getting those roads fixed.
Okay, but even on 39th, Merritt Funeral, Ginger's Tag Agency, you can't even get in the parking lot when it just rains, not a flood.
Oh, I know.
And Mercer Adams is a moat around it.
We have drainage problems in Bethany, no
Okay.
doubt. So I think we can agree on that. Yes, ma'am.
You keep saying we are going to do this, but actually it'll go before the council and have to be approved before anything is done, correct?
When I say we, I mean the residents of Bethany.
Well, you're not talking about a neighborhood association doing it. You're talking about the city of Bethany doing it.
I'm talking about the residents of Bethany related to this overlay.
But you're talking about the city council approves anything that's done.
Yes, ma'am. Ultimately, that's the last action, and then the overlay will be in place, and then developers
The
are-
last action, not the beginning?
Well, the city council will approve the overlay, but to get to that point, we're gonna have a series of meetings, discussions
With the city council?
with, yes, open public meetings as well as residents like we have today. So this is the beginning.
To do an overlay, you have to have public hearings.
Right. So, okay, one more question. Yes, sir. Well, that will be part of the process. We will allocate funds in the budget. We can have or come up with a capital improvement plan. Is that correct?
The idea is developing a vision plan strategy, looking at what all the potential capital infrastructure needs need to be within the neighborhood. There's drainage plans and studies that have been done in the past. The engineering and public works department knows what roads need to be done. And so that all has to be put together in a capital improvement plan. And theoretically, Ward 2 will feed that into the overall city budget.
That
Like
is
the
an
lady said, you know, we've got problems already. Let's take care of those before we develop more problems.
well, as a part of the overlay, we're identifying those problems so that we can take care of them.
She just identified a bunch of them.
I know, that's why
The drainage and everything.
we're
What
getting
are
there.
we doing about that?
That's coming up. And thank you for taking me to task. Can I throw some candy at you? Very good. Let's go to the next one. Okay, rain gardens. Does everybody know what rain gardens are? Okay. Mark, could you provide a brief explanation of Kansas City?
So rain gardens are typically really a water quality device that allows stormwater runoff to filter through a landscaped area that has a filtration design that will allow it to percolate into the ground and basically store some water in it and reduce some of the stormwater runoff before it goes into the stormwater system, thereby cleaning that stormwater runoff out.
In layman's terms, it's a poor man's drainage solution. And that's what we need because the drainage situation in Bethany, I'll go on the record, it has been neglected over the years and it's going to cost a small fortune to fix it. So what are our options? We can think about and look at rain gardens. And if you look at the survey results, it's kind of up and down. Very important as opposed to not important. And the city staff did a great job of kind of defining that, looking at what it is, and informing people about what a rain garden would be. What's the consensus in the room? What do you all think about rain gardens? We got 2 votes back here. I think that allows for candy. Positive votes.
Can you elaborate on why you're in favor of them?
I would agree that Bethany has drainage issues, and we've, in our specific property, we have our own drainage issues, and we've looked into what to do about it, and we'd like to, we've come up with the idea of doing rain gardens in our own property, and I think it makes sense in a larger scale with the rest of Bethany too, because I know that they have limited funds and have limited limited ways to deal with the.
Right. And so this would address your concern. I think it's an inexpensive way to attempt to begin the process of handling the drainage issue. And well, it would be an open, it'd be kind of like a French drain scenario type deal.
Yeah, they're designed to be dry within 24 hours. It may hold water up till 24 hours if they're designed properly, but they're supposed to be dry after that.
And they're decorative. So, depends on how you look at it. But, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to piggyback on to what my husband was saying. What I really like about the rain gardens is that they're bioretentive. So you're using nature to work with the nature of a lot of water coming in. And yeah, you'll have some ponding, but like my husband said, they're designed that within 24 hours you do not have a ponding issue, but you have a way of managing water that, like you said, it has some purification qualities to it. It has some amazing features to it, but you're also using nature to help with the problem of a lot of water at once, and we get that in Oklahoma.
So, and to apply that to your situation, what if we had a rain garden near an intersection and that allowed water to go into the rain garden as opposed to the intersection, preventing some amount of water from getting in there? That may be a simple version of the solution or the problem, but that is a possibility. Yes, ma'am, in the back row.
I was going to make a comment that my piece of property here in Bethany has major runoff, and it makes me concerned, where is that water going to? It's just going into, I don't know, a ditch that's, like a block away. And I think that my yard could use that type of a thing to retain water in my yard and help my yard and not have to depend on additional watering and things like that. So, and I know that I'm not the only piece of property that has major runoff, and you kind of wonder where's it all filtering out to.
Right. It's a natural solution that's inexpensive.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Julie.
On the survey, when I was filling it out, it was kind of hard for me to prioritize that because it seemed like it should have been broken down, like how important is drainage, the drainage solution. And that would have been very important. And then these others, the remedies, I guess, for it, because it's, a lot of more low impact development. And so then I could have prioritized which ones, I would have wanted to fund first or tackle first. I think that's kind of maybe why you got some of the answers that you got.
The question could have been improved.
Well, yeah, just the way it's the overall, caption drainage and then break down the solutions. Because I felt like we were competing between what's more important, a rain garden or a drainage or this. It was kind of hard to prioritize that.
Understood, well taken, and I think this is the beginning. And so is this the next question? Drain improvements. Okay. This is pretty apparent. And what I like about this is that it's a hard record as to the survey results of the city, the residents of Bethany. We know that this is a storm drain problem, and we know people want it fixed. But, 66 or 56% of the people think it's important or very important?
And this was the one question where there was a preponderance of everybody in important, very important. So that even outweighed the sidewalk prioritization was this.
Right, which in my book says a lot. The real question is, how are we going to pay for it? So we can come up with water gardens, we can come up with solutions with the overlay, but ultimately, if you guys want it, we're going to have to find a way to pay for it. So it's been neglected over the years, but here we are. So we're talking. Yes, ma'am.
I agree with the questioning and the wording. I didn't like it. I think it could have had a better result for me if it was laid out different. But like if you put, unless you're going to put this down the center of 39th, this little flower garden is not going to take care of the water in front of Ginger's in any means. Not, and look at all the landscaping down at Mercer Adams. It's not working there.
Right. This isn't the solution and the end-all be-all, but it's a part of the solution. Does that make sense?
Rain gardens are not a stormwater quantity or volume solution. We're just saying there is some added smaller benefits to the side of it.
And in the application would be in the overlay. We would have specific instructions saying, hey, we recommend if you want to put in an overlay or if you want to put in a rain garden, here are the instructions on what the city would recommend.
And what specific guidelines so that they would fit a certain standard.
Correct.
And so a lot of this runoff, what we have is you have to imagine all these houses have gutters, runs off their yard into the street that already doesn't drain as well. So if you can eliminate the runoff from the house itself, you eliminate 30% of the problem. So you have 30% less collection in the street. Therefore, the runoff is less.
Sure.
So I think this is very important.
Well, ultimately, and Mark, what's the estimated cost for a block to install a new drainage system? Mr. Caton?
I'll defer to Mr. Caton.
And we're not putting you on the spot either. Let's set up a hypothetical. If you wanted to put a stormwater drainage system in a 1-block area, let's say between 46th and 48th on Mueller, how much would that cost, approximately?
It's a trick question. Without a pump, water flows downhill, as everyone knows. As the city engineer, I would never recommend starting in the middle of the system. You start at the low point and work your way back. That way the water has somewhere to go.
Okay.
But if you want a quick and dirty rule on how much pipe big enough to do that would be in the ground installed, you can probably count on about, I'm going to throw out anywhere from, let's say $200 a foot, $200 a linear foot for that pipe in the ground. And that's just to get it there. That doesn't count fixing the street to get it into the pipe in the first place and those sorts of things. So you're talking about extremely expensive.
Turnkey estimated cost would be what?
For a 600-foot block of storm sewer, what's 200 times 600? There you go, $120,000 for one block.
Okay. So now we're putting it in scale, right?
And then you have to do the street, and then you have to do the downstream areas to get, if you've just got a wonderful new block with wonderful new storm drainage, and it all runs down to the low end of that block and has nowhere to go. So it just backs up into your wonderful new street, and if it's made of asphalt, it's gonna sit there and degrade very quickly. So you really need to start at the low point and work your way back.
With all that said,
yes,
approximately drainage, street, curbing, is it fair to say it would be about $250,000?
I would say more than that.
Okay. So does everybody understand that? One block. So it's a lot of money.
Right.
But that's what it's going to take to get this problem fixed, however we do it. So that's the reality of the situation. And that's why we're...
I just wanted to piggyback on what he was saying. Didn't we a couple years ago team up with UConn for rain barrels?
Yes. In fact, we do have a rain barrel program right now.
Okay.
And if you want to go pick one up, I think the city staff, we were going to try to get one for the prize tonight, but I don't know if we figured that out. But yeah, we do have rain barrel. That's another solution.
There is something that, as homeowners, we can get a rain barrel.
Yes.
So we can collect the water in our own yards.
And prevent these, well, yeah, exactly. Use it, save our water bill. Mr. Shirey.
Hold on.
Thank you very much. Am I on?
You're on.
You're on.
I'm on. We haven't identified a problem which this city has. We have the stormwater yearly rain total that if we're on a 5-year basis for rains, and that is very, very low. Because if you go back and look at I believe it was last Sunday's paper, they talked about Oklahoma City and the 50-year flood, the 20-year flood, and that's something that I think we need to address before we start addressing what we're going to do with these small amounts of rain that we think we're going to get rid of. And this is something that the city has to address, because just like our city engineer said, you can't force a 60-inch pipe down a 12-inch pipe and get very many good results. So we have to have an overall drainage plan.
That is an excellent point, Mr. Shirey, because this overlay discussion is really the beginning of the discussion for the bigger plan. Because where are we going and how we're doing this? And that's an excellent point, because we need to be able to know what we need to do, how we need to do it, when we need to do it, and how we're going to pay for it. So this is a segment, a piece of the puzzle, so to speak. But you're right, Mr. Shirey. We don't, and we need to have that ironed out, hammered out, however you want to do it. And that is very important in my mind, because what if we do have a 100-year flood, or how are we going to deal with that? And how's it going to affect your property value? And, you know, where's the city going to come in and take care of business, kind of thing? So.
In 1995 or so, the city of Bethany made a proposal to do away with the flooding problems that we were having in southeast Bethany. And I think everybody knows that what we have in Lake Hammond at probably a 5-year rain. And that was going to cost us $19 million, if my memory serves me right. And that was going to be for less than probably a quarter of a mile, maybe a half a mile from. It was going to go from 36th and Hammond to a point a quarter of a mile west of 30th and Hammond, and dump into an Oklahoma City storm drain that they have built up at this point that we can use. But we decided at that time it was cheaper to buy all the houses in that area and not worry about it.
Well, and let me add to that. So are you saying that there was a proposed bond issue to take care of that project?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And what was the result of that bond vote?
The folks that lived in the area says it's not worth it. We had several other little bond issues, a swimming pool and other things, but that particular area said, we don't care. The rain lasts and runs away in a day and a half, and we're done with it.
Right. So,
and I'll make another point. In the state of Oklahoma, streets are storm drains. That's the design. We very seldom bury one for the reason that our city engineer says. They are extremely expensive, and you can't drive a car down them.
Right. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to fix it? And we've talked about it. The city has proposed it before, and we really didn't make any good progress. So what are we doing? We're talking about it right now. And so those are excellent points. But let's keep moving on this thing. Wow, time is flying. So here we go. We're going to fly through these quickly, and I apologize. We've had some great discussion. In fact, Mr. Shirey, would you like some candy? Well, here, Mr. Carlson, I think let's see what he does, if he takes it or not. Okay, well, maybe the young lady next to you will be happy to get some. All right, the importance of reestablishing ditches. Okay, let's talk about this briefly. we may go a little bit longer than 8 o'clock tonight. There was a situation, and the city came back in and redug the ditches that had filled in, which allowed for some drainage. I think it was up on Mueller, and where was that?
It was on Willow.
Mueller and 46 and Willow. And that was a possible solution to try to get something fixed or set up. And so, well, we did one part of it, and there's some issue, Mr. Schauer talked about Mueller, I understand, where we were trying to do trenching on one side, but somehow, some way, they only did one part, but they didn't continue the project, which is an issue in and of itself. But let's go into the results. This is kind of
It's an odd thing, and maybe it was because of the way the question or the order of the question, because if you're worried about drainage, one of the ways of being able to fix this quickly with public works staff would be to dig the ditches back out that have silted or filled in or been filled in intentionally.
Right. And that's just a time thing. It's a maintenance issue. And at one point, that was the solution. We had these trenches, and then that would allow the water runoff to go into the drain that was adequate. But the adequacy of the drainage now is not where it should be, but yet this was an alternative, just like rain gardens. We're looking at everything.
32% said it wasn't important. So we don't know whether that meant maybe you don't want to have the ditch there, or it's too hard to mow or maintain, or any comments?
Arlita, Dr. Arlita.
One of the comments that I heard was, rather than having ditches, maybe we could have culverts, or maybe we could have something that had grass over it, or maybe this rain garden idea is better than having a ditch in front of your house, because then you can't have a sidewalk and there's not room to park. So I think it was looking at those alternatives to ditches that maybe caused the lower scores.
Right. We can interpret the data. I mean, that's, yes, ma'am.
Isn't a grass yard? I mean, a grass yard's going to absorb, and most of Mueller, there are a lot of concrete, but it is grass, and it's going to absorb without putting a little garden in. But I've been here for 38 years, and so I've seen the life of that ditch down Mueller. It was stopped up most of the time where it went underneath the driveway. So if you put a bigger pipe there and keep it all the way, and is the end of the line the duck pond behind the library? Because it's just not deep enough. Maybe you could dig the duck pond out some more, because those people are flooded there.
Those are all legitimate concerns, and I'm glad you voiced that, because you know, that's why we're here. Those are excellent ideas. I can't.
Sorry, I grew up in Edmond, and I had one of those in front of my house.
Right.
It was bigger pipes, and they cleaned it out periodically. It drained it within a few minutes, really, of just a normal rain, and there was never standing water like on this picture.
Right.
Never. A child could drown in there.
So the thing is, that would be a requirement in the overlay related to our neighborhood, because that's a unique situation, if you even want to call that. Yes, sir.
Just a consideration, a lot of the people on the question may not be impacted by ditches, so they're going to put not important. So that's kind of a misnomer question if you really get into it.
Yeah, good point.
Okay.
Okay, permeable pavement. All right. This stuff is kind of impressive in that we're talking about drainage, and we're not talking about a concrete slab. We're talking about a way for, well, actually, I'll talk to the engineer, and he can kind of give us a definition.
So the permeable pavement is giving you an option instead of a concrete or an asphalt drive. This product allows for water. It's a low impact design concept that allows for water to flow through it more, and so therefore it reduces the amount of runoff. It's not a significant amount, but if you add it up, it's something that could be considered. And because we're not in an overlay district, a permeable paver option, say for your driveway right now, is not an option. And it may not be appropriate for all other areas of Bethany, but this is something that you could consider.
So, okay, how does that play out? If you're putting in a new driveway, you have certain ordinances that require you to put in concrete. If we had an overlay and you wanted to put in a driveway, you could consider permeable pavement. And that would be an alternative which would prevent drainage and would allow a way for the water coming off of your house before it got into the roadway to go through permeable pavement, whatever the scenario would be. And then there would be specific guidelines as to what a developer or homeowner could look at to say, hey, that sounds like a good idea. Maybe I'll do that. And it'll help with the water flow. Plus, they look really interesting, and it provides a unique look to the neighborhood. So it's kind of a win-win, and it looks like everybody agreed with that to the extent that the staff did a great job of kind of defining what a permeable pavement is. But as it is right now, you can't do that. So the overlay would allow us to get there, allow us for our particular area, because it's unique and it's, we're kind of putting everything together, allow that to happen and solve one of the big problems we have in the city. Yes, sir.
Does the water flow through the
Well, it
as opposed to a concrete drive, yes, it does allow water to seep through the pavement
Where does
itself.
that water go?
Into the ground.
Right, into the groundwater maybe? Maybe the level of water out there is being polluted by all this stuff in the streets?
Well, again, this permeable pavers is a low impact design concept. It's something that is more bio-friendly. It allows it to go through the permeable paver. When the water goes through that, it collects some of the
Right.
oils and
The
greases
road
and all.
Tars and everything that are there.
Oils and greases that go through. That's what the product is meant to collect.
Right. And it either gonna plug up the road or it's gonna go into the groundwater. So, what do you accomplish?
Well, it's not as an extreme as that's being depicted because, again, it's a low impact design concept and it allows it to seep through there.
That's more candy right there. I love that question.
Those pavers have to be maintained. They silt in, so they would have to have a type of maintenance on them. Also, grass seed would grow in them, so you'd have to weed eat. Like if you have a driveway now that has cracks in it, you have to weed eat. Grass grows up through it. That's kind of a permeable paver as it is.
Excellent comments. No, you
give that to your kiddos.
No, here you go.
What is the cost difference between
sure.
permeable
Here, I'm
pavement,
gonna put it
typical
right there.
pavement, and asphalt?
That's a big debate. Low impact design, originally 10 years ago, everyone that developed or construction side said, low impact design, you're only adding costs to projects. At this point in time, the products that are out there, the technology, at this point in time, your cost of low impact design, if done, is about the same. I mean, it can depend on the size of the driveways, the application that you're doing, but it also has to look at, is it a fraction a little bit more, and then what do you get as the benefits from that? So,
That's an excellent point. And Mr. Shirey said, wouldn't you get the same benefits if you had a gravel driveway?
a gravel driveway is not really a low impact design. It has a lot of other issues associated that are environmental.
He would like you to reiterate as to what those issues are.
Gravel driveways wash away. Gravel driveways end up in the street. Gravel ends up everywhere. Gravel has dust. It doesn't necessarily mean a permanent type solution.
My suggestion would be that this would raise cost even if it is a fraction, and perhaps that fraction could be spent on something that's more valuable in the return on your dollar when you're talking about your aesthetics of your property. Considering the impact that this would have would be really negligible in the overall scheme of the issue. So that would be my suggestion, is to focus the escalated cost elsewhere where you're going to see a greater return on your value.
Excellent point. That's candy work right there.
I knew you were tired of the stick.
Into the water table.
Well, to counter what he just said, though, it would give people the choice to do it if they wanted to do it, and right now they don't have the choice to do it, and it's their dollar investment. It's just a change in administrative policy for the city.
So long as overlays are written as options and not requirements.
Yes.
And that's a big distinction.
Okay.
That gets lost in
Can you say that into the mic, and then you deserve candy on that one?
I've got enough. Or
Oh,
she
you
can
need
give
some
to her,
more.
right? Yeah. What I said was, that's a great point, so long as in the overlay it's written as an option and not a requirement, because most often the regulations that are contained within an overlay district are requirements and not options. And so that word is a very big word that can get lost in the greater scheme of things.
We're promoting tooth decay here, pardon me.
When you're retrofitting a neighborhood, though, that was built previously, a lot of the things that need to happen there need to be less restrictive in some ways, because like the setbacks and things like that were less restrictive when they were built. So in this case, it may end up being a little less restrictive than more restrictive.
Excellent debate, excellent points, and that's why we're going to have continued discussion about the overlay. Yes, ma'am.
You can do those now with the current ordinances that we have.
I think that's from
Because
what
my neighbor has one.
Well, then let's go ahead and get it done. And maybe it.
Well, you don't need to make it. You just have the ability to do it if they want.
Right, Mr. Caden, do you have a comment on that?
That'll sweeten your disposition.
Steve had a comment.
Mr. Steve Caden,
I
city
just want to
engineer.
clarify, the pervious paving would be allowed on a driveway right now, on the private part of the driveway. The driveway approach, the part on the right-of-way, is not allowed at this time. But if you want to have a pervious pavement driveway right now, you certainly can.
What? Okay. Oh, yeah, and, let's have a little technical timeout. Danielle, with city staff, if you're out there, I know you're suffering from the flu. Everybody kind of turn around and say, hello, Danielle, thank you for all your help and whatnot. She did an excellent job with all of this, recuperating or trying to get over the flu, so let's think about her tonight, and hopefully she'll be back at work doing the good stuff.
And then I wouldn't have been the substitute tonight for
Right,
this.
we're doing a great job. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We're making progress. Yes, ma'am.
This gentleman had a great comment that we want to be sure that we have choices. We don't want this to be like a homeowners association. We're trying to turn Ward 2 into a homeowners association where we're required to do things with our own property. We want to have choices.
Point taken. And I think that's excellent to the extent that the overlay are guidelines. So if I wanted to see, hey, what are my options? Hey, I can look at this list and we can do all of this. And I know that when I go to the city to get my site plan or whatever approved, I'm not going to run into barriers. And those are options. We need options. And we need an option to do something that is within the same look and it's cohesive and it improves the neighborhood. That's it.
How about parking now?
Oh yeah, here we go. Importance of parking on one side of the street. Now let's dig into this a little bit. We had a traffic study in and around the school, and there were parking recommendations on Willow that we need to implement, and I think that's in the works at some point. But yeah, parking is a big problem because we have one-car garages, we have houses that were probably built after World War II, and that is an issue when our streets are not as wide as other neighborhoods. But I will tell you, last spring break, I went to Charleston, South Carolina, historic neighborhoods. They love the narrow roadways with parking on one side, and it is, if you've seen it done correctly, it is very attractive. I mean, as attractive as it can be. And so there are solutions to this problem. And I think, based upon what we came up with,
Overwhelmingly, almost 50%.
that's an issue that we need to take up. And I know the mayor has set a traffic committee, and we're in the works on trying to get that taken care of, which will kind of get the parking issue taken care of. But then the other way to get at it is through the overlay and how you want to require the neighborhood to look. and say, well, we're going to do parking on whatever the factor is for that particular roadway, depending on the width or whatever the variable is. Yes, ma'am.
I previously lived in Lansing, Michigan, and it was more of a historic neighborhood, and one of the solutions that they had was your car could be parked in the street until midnight, and from midnight until 6 a.m., if your car was in the street, it got ticketed. That put everyone in a mode that, when they came in, when the family came in, all the occupants came in for the evening, you would put your car in a driveway. And some of the houses did have longer driveways to do that, and they were one car. But anyway, that made for a nicer neighborhood because you were already thinking about you need to get your car collected and put it on your own property and not leave it on the street. And of course up there, they were also having to deal with snow, and your street would not get snow plowed if you had a car in the street. It also helped for garbage collection. It really, it put everyone in a frame of mind that, the street has a purpose, but at some point in time, you got to clean up your street and make it passable.
Excellent points. And one other factor in there is emergency vehicles. Exactly. So if you have an ambulance or a fire truck and you've got parking on both sides of Willow, how are you going to get in there, and the response time, and all of those things are at play. And that's part of the traffic study we had done related to the school, and those are excellent points. And that's stuff that we need to put in the overlay, factors to consider to make sure we can work all those issues out and then come up with a recommendation to say, hey, this is how we're going to do it in the Bethany District neighborhood. So, all right.
So now we're on sidewalks.
Oh. Do we need to sing happy birthday? Okay, everybody. Wait a minute. I don't know if we can do that on a public broadcast. There might be some, payment or whatever. But why don't we just, ma'am, what's your name? Janice Gunter. Janice. Everybody say, happy birthday, Janice.
Happy birthday, Janice.
Man, this is like, we might as well sing Kumbaya while we're at it or whatever.
I've got a question.
Yes,
we
sir.
have a sidewalk from 46th Street to 50th Street on the east side of the Mueller. Why do we have all this parking and the school kids have to walk out around all that grass and into the public? Why can't we have no parking from 46th to 50th on the east side of the street?
That's a good point. We need to figure out a traffic study related to that particular issue. And I think
we need to look at, I don't know the details of that traffic study, so we just need to look at that.
Isn't that sidewalk right against the road?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure you could attest to this as well. That sidewalk is worthless. There is absolutely no barrier right there for a car. So you really need to have a physical barrier between the roadway and the sidewalk, which would be my suggestion to a number of slides ago. Don't put a sidewalk unless you have a physical barrier of a minimum grass and a curb. Otherwise, it's useless. No kid will use that. No parent will want their kid to use that.
Right. Excellent. Mr. Caden.
That is correct. That actually is an extension of the roadway if it's up against the roadway.
Right.
But the traffic committee, as Mr. Palmer's brought up, can direct Public Works to install no parking if it deems it necessary.
Right. So we got a tool and we're fixing to use it. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Yes, ma'am.
We used to have no traffic parking on Mueller long ago. I don't know if it was a rule or we just did it.
Now, what part of Mueller are we talking about?
From 42nd to 50th,
Okay.
The whole length of the school. And let's be honest, it's the transfer ends that are that are the problem, which is another thing I'd like to talk about. They don't pay taxes, and they won't even get out of the way when you're trying to use the street.
Those are good issues. I think that's kind of outside the scope of this meeting, and I'll be happy to talk to you about that after the meeting, because I have some information that I think you would be interested in.
Okay. I watched a car parked on the street of about 48th. Well, it was 48th. And they park there all the time, and you have to veer around it. Well, a guy veered around it, and the guy coming from the other direction to miss him veered out of the way and ran over the stop sign.
Right.
Because that car parks there all the time.
Well, that's an interesting issue, and I can break that down into several different issues, and I think we can talk about that at some point. But, and I don't mean to cut you off early. I want to be very respectful, but we got to get through this stuff.
Now, on these, I'm going to just flip through this, and I'll give you some analysis. So, the paper survey versus the online survey, we've had a few differences of what was coming back as far as, was it 26% or 33%? And then, so looking at 43rd Street, looking at 42nd Street, those were really not definitive on what people wanted to say, but the most definitive one was the priority for filling gaps in the sidewalk.
Okay, let's talk about that. What do we mean by filling gaps? If you have a sidewalk and then a house and then a sidewalk, that's a gap. And whether it's in the situation with a residence or a business or
a vacant lot.
Or a vacant lot. So I think this is interesting to the extent that we thought that it was, hey, we need to put sidewalks in on this place and this place, but in reality, the importance for the residents was, let's just connect them. Let's find the gaps and fix it. So, I mean, basically 75%, give or take, set the priority, in my opinion. And what do you all think about that?
Which instead of building a whole new network, it's more about a priority of filling the gaps of what you have, and then possibly when you add a street improvement and do a drainage, then you can worry about a new network of sidewalks. But right now, it was overwhelming to fill the gap.
Right. Thoughts, ideas, pros, cons, suggestions?
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, are you part of the 65%? Probably, maybe so?
Hey, if I could be 99% on that, I'd be it.
Right. Well, it may be as easy as just getting, and I think the city's already done this. They've identified the gaps, but we were talking about what we needed to do related to sidewalks. So I think the thing I like about this is people understand a survey. Whether the questions are good or bad, they understand that that is a real number, and it's not going to go away. It's just like leaving somebody's business card. They're going to have it, and they have to do something with it. And so that's kind of where we are now. So we talked about the streetscapes, and this is kind of a good segue into sidewalks. And it's 8:10, 8:12, 12 minutes over, but we'll work through sidewalks quickly. We initially had a Let's Get Connected project that we were working on, and the city was looking into figuring out how to come up with a sidewalk plan. And correct me if I'm wrong, we have a grant over by 23rd where they're installing sidewalks related to the school. Was that right?
Yeah, exactly. Rockwell, it goes on Rockwell from 16th to 23rd, and then west on 23rd towards the school, yes.
Right, and so the city had recommended some different areas and, a trail system or, some way to connect to Stinchcom, bicycle routes, things like that. But there was an ordinance that was being proposed to change the ordinance to allow a homeowner to put in a sidewalk. And one of the issues was, well, how wide is the sidewalk going to be? Is it going to be 4 feet? Is it going to be 5 feet? Is it going to be, what are the parameters and how do we set the requirements for the installation of a sidewalk? And that was the issue in the neighborhood because, we've got 4 feet, we probably may have 3 feet sidewalks. So how do you cohesively establish a plan that will allow the homeowner to put something in, probably at their own cost, which would match whatever's already present? So that's kind of why we're here to talk about sidewalks in the neighborhood. And so I would be interested to see what kind of feedback you all have about where or what you think about that scenario and maybe any improvements, thoughts, ideas. Other than this pretty direct statement about connecting the sidewalks with basically connecting what we already have as opposed to installing new ones.
I think the feeder sidewalks to 42nd Street, and then for sure both 42nd, the length of from Rockwell to the edge of Bethany on 42nd on one side of the road or the other. Right now you have, like you said, connectors that are back and forth, and I'm a hover parent. I have a 9 and 11-year-old, and we're 4 blocks away from the school, and I don't let them walk because it goes from 4 to 3 to a pole in the middle to everything. Fire hydrant. So if we had the connector streets to 42nd Street, if we did those right, then the residents on the other streets might spend a little bit of money and say, hey, I want it to look like that, and then you might be able to get what you need.
And as it is right now, the requirement to put in a sidewalk is pretty hefty. I mean, is that right, Mr. Caton?
Yeah, right now our ordinance is actually onerous on, if you wanted to put a sidewalk in front of your house, it's actually a public improvement, and you don't even want to think about going through that process. But to address your point about, the city does have a strategy on a new network, if you want to put it as Mark did, to concentrate on basically radiate from things like schools and parks that are pedestrian oriented, and then eventually wind into the neighborhoods and connect up with the filling in the gaps. That's kind of the strategy that had been developed at this point. So, and there are some monies available federally, like Safe Routes to School and things like that, that can start that process and link up very nicely with what you're talking about.
Right, and what we're talking about is how do we want that sidewalk look for our neighborhood? What guidelines do we want to set for our neighbors to put in a sidewalk? And so that's kind of where we are related to the overlay. Now that's probably independent of the let's get connected, project with the trails and whatnot, because seriously, our sidewalk needs are different than 23rd Street, are different from other parts of Bethany, and it's unique to each area. We kind of have our own little subjective need, and then that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to apply to other parts of Bethany. So that's why we want to put this in the overlay, saying, hey, this is where we want to go. This is kind of the look that we have, and then make sure everybody's clear, they have a reference, and then we can implement that plan over time. Yes, ma'am.
So what is code for our current sidewalks?
Oh, Mr. Cate would love to explain that to you.
Right now, our minimum width in a residential street is 4 feet wide. For a collector street, it's 5 feet wide, and for a major thoroughfare or expressway, it's 6 feet wide. The only other thing we have to comply with is ADA, Americans with Disability Act. They can be no narrower than 4 feet, and even on those, there has to be a passing lane every 200 feet. Even if you have a narrower one, you have to have a wide spot where you can have a passing lane. So any overlay would also have to comply with the federal regulations in that regard.
And let me qualify that a little bit. The overlay would specify how we deal with those issues and how you would try to solve the problem, as opposed to spending city resources, or for that matter, residents, their resources to try to solve the problem. It would be, it's a bad pun, it'd be a roadway to figure out how to get through the planning, the site plan or the process for the ordinances with the city. Right now, it's a headache. I mean, really is. So part of the overlay would simplify the process and allow better access and a clear capability. That's kind of where we're going. Mr. Shirey.
Go back to the sidewalks. I see in Ward 2, the major problem are Mueller and Asbury, to allow the children safe passage from 50th Street, which is the north edge of the school district, to the school. But the street on Mueller is so narrow that you could not conform to the sidewalk ordinances if we didn't redo the street. So what would your suggestion be, and what would the city engineer's suggestion be? Because I feel that the right-of-way going up Mueller is not wide enough to accommodate a 26-foot street, 2 4-foot sidewalks, a easement for the water mains that need to be replaced in that particular area of town. I think the one on Mueller has a major problem with infrastructure below grade.
Excellent points. All of those points hit the need to take care of this wonderful problem, is what I call it. Because what does that mean? In my mind, we're getting a new road. And in my mind, we're going to solve the problem and figure out what we have and how we can fix it. And that would be my response.
But we can solve this new road problem by putting in a paving district in that particular area.
Excellent point. There was a paving district. Mr. Richards did that on Wheeler back in the day. And if you're familiar with the paving district, it is basically an agreement between the residents. Mr. Richards did this. He got all the residents to kind of sign up.
I'm not done yet.
They agreed to. Mr. Shire's not giving up his microphone, but
no, I'm not giving it up yet. No.
Let me finish this. So basically, what happened was they allocated funds that came out of their property taxes to fund a paving district, which put in curbing and a concrete roadway for that particular area, and that's an option. I mean, that really is. Mueller could do it if they wanted to, and we've talked about that, Mr. Sauer. There are possibilities and solutions. The thing is, how are we going to get there, and what are we going to do? And if that is, the overlay should include a section. If you want to do a paving district, here's how you do it. These are the requirements. This is what we suggest, and then you're off to the races. So it's a matter of community involvement and identifying the problem, and then again willing to pay for it to get that taken care of. And I want to be clear, paving district would be an independent situation by the residents. The city would handle part of the funding or the funding, and then from what I understand, the city, the city would receive the funds and then do the work. Is that a fair statement?
Actually, the residents would hire attorneys and engineers to do the design and the legal work, and then the city would essentially just serve as the conduit to sell bonds that would then be used to pay over the course of 10 years, I believe, to pay back the cost of the paving district.
Is that
one serious question? The payback of these bonds, would that be a general bond?
No, it would be attached to only those residents of the paving district.
Of the paving district that would have to be voted on by the residents adjoining that street, as well as best that I can understand, as well as the intersections and a distance back from the intersections in both directions.
What might have been simpler was when the school was.
We need a microphone.
But I can't hear you. I have to turn up. Let me turn up my hearing aid. Okay.
One more.
What might have been simpler was when the school was doing their additions and it was required of them to improve the street. The citizens would have still been paying for it. The school wasn't paying for it because the school doesn't pay for it. It's a bond that the citizens pay for, and that street could have been improved and could have already been done.
Well, but the fact is, you had to get the participation of the residents to get to that point, and it's
well,
not.
You don't have to. You don't have to on that particular area, because it would have been figured into the cost of the school in the land that is adjacent to the school.
Okay, I understand that.
And then the other question is Asbury is a 26-foot street.
Correct.
Is that correct?
From what I understand, and
it is also upon a 50-foot right-of-way. So that area could be
40-foot right-of-way.
40-foot right-of-way?
According to Mr. Caden. Yeah.
Okay. But I can see where that would be a problem. But you almost need a 50-foot right-of-way to provide adequate transportation needs for automobiles in that area, as well as pedestrian traffic and some sort of a utility easement, so that we would not have to lay water mains under the street to to facilitate adequate water supply in that area, and which would be a major improvement in certain people living in that area. But we would have to go back in. This is a very complicated problem when you get into that.
But we're talking about it. It is super complicated, and I think that's why it's been kind of pushed back, and now I think we're at a point where we need to do something. And Mr. Shirey's dead on. He knows
Steve,
the
if I
process.
might also.
Yes, Mr.
The
Carlson.
city of the village, which is half our size, both population and space-wise, yesterday approved by an 84% vote a general obligation bond for $8.5 million worth of paving and sidewalks. That's yet another option to your neighborhood paving district. Geo bond issue, 84%. We thought we were doing good with, what was it, 72%, Arlita, on the library?
So, okay, for those at home, tell everybody what a general obligation bond is and how that works, briefly. Yes.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. A general obligation bond issue is something that the city initiates. They take it with an initiative. They'll have on the ballot, they'll have specific projects listed with budgets for that project, and then those will add up. If the voters approve it by a majority, then the city is able to go out and sell bonds, general obligation bonds, and then pay those bonds back over a period of time.
It's applied to your property tax. Thank you, Ms. Holloway. What does everybody think about what I will call a rolling general obligation bond, like a 5-year general obligation bond that expires? So we would have a list of projects completed for that 5-year general obligation bond. It would come up again. We would have that same amount of money for another list of projects over the 5 years, and then piece by piece, we upgrade the system from one end of the city to the next. Do you all think that that's a feasible alternative, something you'd be interested in? Dr. Arlita? That's the only way to go?
Well, it's a way.
You're on.
It's a way to go and keep going. It is so misleading to have a geo bond for a period of time and then at the end of that time let it expire, when you could easily say to the residents, your taxes won't go up at all. All you have to do is vote yes, because you're continuing the amount that you have been paying. If you let it go, then you're dropping that amount of money that you have been earning, and you have to start over again.
Right, and I think...
And it just doesn't make sense. And for planning purposes, it's important that we stage these projects and not just have everything can't be done at once, so we can't do anything.
Right, and
it's been our practice.
It's my understanding that we did have that kind of system set up in Bethany in the 80s, but then the process stopped, and we never got back to where we were. And for just out of, full disclosure, people don't want their taxes to go up, and we're right there. I mean, the piece of the pie is smaller and smaller because, we can only have so much that's available for those general obligation bonds. So that's a delicate question, to say the least. But is it something we need to do? Yes. How do we get there, and what would be acceptable, and what would the residents approve? That's something that we need to discuss to get to that point. So we're kind of getting off track. It's 8:30.
No, we're not off track. No.
Well, let me clarify that, Mr. Shirey. We're off track on our time.
Time is something that we all have a lot of. But you have a certain amount of profit.
Get that thing up next to your face.
Well, I don't like to eat these suckers, but to pass a geo bond issue, it's rather political. You've got to give these guys a little bit, you've got to give these guys a little bit, you've got to give these guys a little bit, and you've got to give these guys a little bit. Or you cannot get a 50% majority that wants to pass the GO bond issue. It's just like our library. We passed a GO bond issue for our library, but it was something that the whole city could benefit from.
And excellent point. And I think to address that concern, we got to come up with a big plan. Let's make a big old fat list of everything that's a concern, figure out where it needs to be related to the different areas in the city, come up with some plan to pinpoint how we're going to do that equally within the residents and the city of Bethany. I think we're on our way. That would allow politically some way to get the general obligation bond passed. I may be naive, but that's something we can.
You can also allow, if we could get some cooperation from Bethany School District, if you live in the city of Bethany, your child could go to school at Bethany School.
Mr. Shirey pointed out if I think what he's saying is if we expanded the Bethany School District, your kid or children, pardon me, could live in Bethany and go to Bethany School. That is an issue that I would love to debate, but apparently we're kind of running out of time. So we have one more comment, and then I would like the mayor to kind of close this out, and then I'll have one more comment after this, and then we'll go from there.
It's just a short comment. That's how all the other cities do it with the GO bonds, that when they expire, you ask for another project because the projects never run out. I mean, and you've got to keep going, and you've got to fund them some way.
Right. Excellent discussion tonight. Thank you for being here. Facebook Live is a great way to communicate with everybody. Thank you, Nikki, for being here. Thank you, Barry, for Facebook Live. Mark, thank you for all your help. Danielle, thank you for all you've done. This was a great opportunity to get the ball rolling. So we got a lot of work to do, and let's keep talking. With that, I will give the floor to our esteemed mayor, Mr. K.P. Westmoreland.
I just want to say thank you for everybody that's come out to participate in this. You've heard it from me and many others before said that if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll keep getting what we've always got. And the definition of insanity is to keep doing what you've always done, expecting a different result. So I really appreciate the conversation, the amount of work and effort that's gone in from our council team, the city staff, the citizens that are passionate about certain things. It doesn't bother us in the least to disagree. I love being in a meeting. That's probably not quite that, right? But being in a meeting and I have an idea and everybody sitting around the table are seeing it from a different perspective and they poke holes in my idea. I'd rather them do that than me think, this was a great idea, look what I did, and it turned into something far less than great. Mr. Caton sits in meetings with me all the time as a nuclear engineer, the smartest man on planet Earth, in my opinion, and tells me I'm an idiot all the time. Not really, but I'm sure he wants to. But I love the fact that we're trying to move forward as a city. And we won't always agree, but we are a team, not just the city council, which we have a great council, not just the city staff, we have a great staff and employees with the city. But I truly believe that the citizens of Bethany are the greatest citizens on planet Earth. And this is the greatest place to live. And I want the world to know about it. And so we need to do some things to progress, to move forward, to be proactive. And this is what it's all about. This isn't this is what we're going to do, get ready, we're about to mow you over with it. This is a conversation. These are ideas. These are things that could happen. Other people are doing it. Other cities are doing things. And things are happening. And there's no reason why we are not setting the bar for the rest of the world, definitely the state of Oklahoma, as to how you do things right and how you do things where people want to come here to shop, want to come here to live, raise their families, and come here to visit. Because let's tell the truth, there's probably only 20,000 people who are going to get to call this home. And the rest of them are just going to get to experience a great time for a weekend hanging out with us. So thank you for coming out and being passionate about your point of view. And let's all get on the same team and make Bethany as great as it possibly can be. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And with that, I'll give you some chocolate worthy, and we're good. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody at home. This is the beginning of the discussion. We will begin the process of getting the overlay written, defined, approved. So hold tight. Please participate. Have a great evening. Thank you for being here.